It's Monday, March 2nd, 2026, one of the most extraordinary weekends in geopolitics of this era. Next on the AM Update. Many Americans woke up to the news on Saturday morning that was delivered in the middle of the night, Friday into Saturday. Here's President Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago.
And we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests.
U.S. Central Command commenced Operation Epic Fury at the direction of President Trump. Strikes began at 1:15 a.m. Eastern Time. That would be 9:45 a.m. local time in Tehran, Iran. U.S. and partner forces, mostly Israel, initiated large-scale strikes to dismantle Iran's security apparatus, prioritizing imminent threats. Targets included Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps command and control facilities, Air Force defense capabilities, missile and drone launch sites, and military airfields. Marked one of the largest concentrations of U.S. military firepower in the region in a generation, involving precision munitions from air, land, and sea platforms. Central Command described it as a precise, overwhelming campaign to eliminate Iran's nuclear threat, destroy ballistic missile capabilities, degrade proxy networks, and cripple naval forces. That address that you heard President Trump give, that was posted in the middle of the night. He went on to say that he expected the U.S. would face casualties and maybe even loss of life, that quote, often happens in war. He also listed other concrete examples, or at least specific examples, justifying the United States' involvement in Iranian regime change. And he called on Iranians themselves to, if they worked for the government, lay down their arms, and called for the people to rise up. More on that in a little bit. One of the first things that we saw on Saturday morning was the rubble, we're being told, of Ayatollah Khamenei's compound palace in Tehran. Here the story goes. There was intelligence that tipped off the United States and Israel that Ayatollah Khamenei would be at this residence with at least a handful of other high-ranking Iranian officials. That led to the Israeli airstrike that took out that palace. Almost immediately, there were no confirmations, but rumors began circulating that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was among those who were dead. Now, I also want to say this as well. We learned later on in the weekend, it was not the Mossad, as was widely believed, that led to the intel, that led to the decapitation of Ayatollah Khamenei. It was not the Mossad that provided that intelligence. It was actually our own CIA. And I'm being told also, because of some weird arcane laws that we have on the books, we were not able to take over and carry out that strike. It had to be Israel that did that. So that's the first extraordinary thing. As I said, on Saturday, those rumors started to circulate almost immediately. It wasn't until about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time that those rumors became reported by first Israeli media and then American media that Ayatollah Khamenei was indeed eliminated. And it wasn't just Ayatollah Khamenei either. That initial volley of strikes in the middle of the night to us on Saturday, it was no less than 40. Now, we don't know if they were all at the same location, but at least spread out across Iran. 40 of that nation's top military and political leaders were taken out and again, just that first volley of attacks. Also notable on Saturday, Israel hacked a prayer app that's used by millions of Iranian citizens. They hacked that app displaying propaganda messages, pro-Israel, pro-West propaganda, things like, hey, help is on the way, lay down your arms, things of that nature. We heard almost immediately from Abbas Araghchi. He would be the foreign minister of Iran, and he was asked early in the day Saturday, at least to our time, how things were going.
Well, thank you for having me. Well, the situation on the ground is quite, I cannot say normal, but the life is going on. Everything is under control. I think Americans and Israelis failed to, access to hit their targets. And now everything is under control.
It turns out everything was not under control. We'll hear more from him later. Again, no fewer than 40 top officials in Iran, including Ayatollah Khamenei, taken out in that initial foray. Also, on Saturday, we heard from a number of nations, some from the Gulf themselves. Some of our own purported allies in Europe, they came out and decried the entire thing. Keir Starmer of the United Kingdom was one of those who said, hey, I want to come out and say, I hate the Ayatollah. He's a terrible, wicked guy. But also, the UK had nothing to do with this strike. Hands off here. Hands off here. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson came out later on in the morning, at least to our time, had this to say about Ayatollah Khamenei.
For joining us here on BBC News.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can we first begin with the latest on the impact of these strikes on the senior political and military leadership in Iran? There are reports that a number of senior leaders, including the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, were targeted in Israel strikes. Can you confirm for us whether the top leadership is still alive, or where are they?
I'm not in a situation to confirm anything.
That was the first tip. And that was before American media and Israeli media started to report that Ayatollah Khamenei was dead. That was the first tip saying that no, all is not well in Iran. Almost immediately, overnight, cheers broke out in Tehran, all across the city, as the insinuations, the news started to reach them about the fate of Khamenei. Those cheers, those celebrations continued into the weekend as well. President Trump confirmed at around middle of the afternoon Saturday, Khamenei was dead. More cheers, more fireworks, more celebrations from Iranians all over the country. Meanwhile, at the UN, the Iranian ambassador to that body had this to say on Saturday.
Thank you. I have one word only. I advise to the representative of the United States to be polite. It will be better for yourself and the country you represent. Thank you.
The representative of the United States has asked for the floor to make a further statement.
Frankly, I'm not going to dignify this with another response, especially as this representative sits here in this body representing a regime that has killed tens of thousands of its own people.
Sparks flying at the United Nations, U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz. Hearing, you heard his voice there as well. Finally, later in the day, Iran time, state media reported the news. You can hear the tremor in that Iranian TV presenter's voice as he announced to the nation that their dear old Ayatollah Khamenei had indeed been taken out. More from this extraordinary weekend. Again, I'm just kind of going beat by beat so far for you here. Beat by beat of just the experience that we saw over the weekend. I'll get into some more big picture thoughts, why I think this was one of the most extraordinary, probably the most extraordinary geopolitical weekend that I've ever seen, at least in my life, and maybe the most extraordinary weekend of this era. That's coming up next. One of those who was taken out in the Israeli-American strikes inside Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Incredible. I remember growing up hearing that name over and over and over again. He is really the grandfather of at least the public face of Iran's nuclear ambitions. I remember David Letterman making fun of this guy, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, I think it was Ahmadinejad whack job, or maybe that was Rush Limbaugh that made fun of him as well. One of the biggest villains of my childhood as I was starting to become more aware of the world around me. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, former Iran president, also taken out. Let's go to this as well. That was Saturday. Overnight Saturday into Sunday, we did it again. B-2 bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, did that long 18-hour one-way haul to Iran, dropped a bunch of ordnance, turned around, came back home. Again, B-2 bombers, more strikes all over the country, mostly concentrated, at least from what we can see in media, mostly concentrated on Iran. Iran did indeed strike back multiple times as the attacks began. Again, their foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, said, you know what, things are not under control. The situation is not under control whatsoever. Iran opted for a strategy, at least that's what it looks like from the outside looking in. They didn't just target U.S. bases, although they did. They didn't just target Israel, although they did. They targeted basically every neighboring country around them except for one that I know of anyway, Turkey. Didn't target Turkey, but they targeted basically every single country in the Gulf around them. Again, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi.
Well, there might be a risk. I have been in touch with all of them, as I said, especially with Qatar and Oman foreign ministers. I explained for them what happened in Oman was not our choice. We have already told our, army, armed forces to be careful about the targets that they choose. As a matter of fact, our, military units are now, in fact, independent and somehow isolated, and they are acting based on instructions, general instructions given to them in advance.
That is Iran's foreign minister, I should say, with a just extraordinary, again, to use that word, extraordinary admission there. Listen to what he said. Now, one of the strikes that Iran carried out was on Oman. And here's what he said. What happened in Oman was not our choice. We've already told our armed forces to be careful about the targets they choose. Our military units are now, in fact, independent and somewhat isolated, and they are acting on general instructions given to them in advance. So, Iran's foreign minister, in less than 24 hours, goes from his Baghdad Bob, everything is under control, to admitting on Al Jazeera, of all places, that they don't have a command structure and that their generals that weren't taken out already are acting independently and are isolated. That was a yo. What was also a yo that we saw? A united front from the Gulf Coast countries. I think Iran's strategy was to hit some of their neighbors in hopes that those neighbors would put pressure on Israel and the United States to dial back their offensive. Instead, what Iran accomplished was the opposite. All of these Gulf Coast countries have actually cozied up to the United States. They're actually pissed at Iran. And that's one of the big picture things that we've seen here. For all of the talk about how big and powerful Iran was, why did all of their neighbors in the Gulf just tolerate them for so long, or cozy up to them so long, or triangulate off of them for so long? We now have a pretty definitive answer if this weekend is to say anything at all. Because I can't see a Gulf Coast country that has come out and said, hey, stop attacking Iran. In fact, they're all saying, we hate this aggression. In fact, it was reported widely Saudi Arabia, who had previously outwardly been saying, no, we need to find a diplomatic solution here. No, we need to do this. They came out pretty aggressively, condemning attacks because Iran tried to attack them as well. It was widely reported Saudi Arabia not only going to allow United States to launch attacks from their territory, they might actually join in themselves. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, to a lesser extent Qatar, all of these countries not trying to triangulate off of Iran anymore. Not trying to do that. Pretty much all united. In fact, on Sunday evening, there was a joint statement from basically all of these countries and France, Germany, UK. All together, basically coming out and saying, this needs to stop. Not the attacks. The regime needs to just be done. There was a random attack on a UK airfield in Cyprus. It's the reason the UK is getting involved. Also an explosion at a French military installation. There were reports that the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier was going to reposition to the Eastern Mediterranean because of this, but that has not been verified by the French government yet. An extraordinary weekend. But you heard President Trump say, or at least I recapped that for you, that he expected American casualties and American deaths, and Central Command did indeed confirm on Sunday morning 3 Americans and I think 5 additional service members. 3 were killed, 5 wounded, others injured in strikes in the opening salvo of Operation Epic Fury. There's the hard part. I've also discussed in passing dead men's switches. I think we're already seeing that from the quote-unquote isolated and independent generals from the Iranian military, the IRGC, at least one branch of their military. There's also this as well. In Austin, Texas, late in the night, Friday night or Saturday night into Sunday, at a popular bar in downtown, a mass shooting took place. A man opened fire, killing 3, injuring, I think, dozens more. Sunday morning, FBI said it was investigating the incident as perhaps a part of a terror nexus. We found out later on in the day on Sunday, this man was a 53-year-old naturalized U.S. citizen. A legal immigrant from Senegal who was living in Pflugerville, Texas. I believe Carol Markowitz at the New York Post was the first to identify this man. Diagna, an American citizen, a naturalized American citizen. He was seen in a photo, a freeze frame from one video of the incident, before the attack or maybe during the attack, wearing a sweatshirt that said, "Property of Allah." It's also reported that he had a copy of the Quran in his car, and his undershirt featured a print of the Iranian flag. Sleeper cells, dead men's switches, just crazy Islamists in general. That's the hard part. Already 3 American service members dead. We've got crazed Islamists, sorry for the redundancy, out here trying to shoot people. Good on the Austin, Texas Police Department, though. I saw it took them about 57 seconds to respond and neutralize this Senegalese man. Good for them. Other news and notes from Sunday as Operation Epic Fury wound on. Trump posted on Truth Social, coalition forces destroyed and sunk 9 Iranian naval ships. Also took out their naval headquarters, quote, "Other than that, their navy is doing very well," end quote. Israeli Defense Force confirmed that basically every single senior member of the Axis of Misery, the Axis of Terror, every single senior leader of that Axis of Terror, Hezbollah, Hamas, they're all dead. including the man at the very top, Ayatollah Khamenei, as we talked about this. The European Union, via Ursula von der Leyen, also basically said, yep, it's time for the Iranian regime to end. Quote from von der Leyen, "This must mean the halt of Iran's military, nuclear, and ballistic missile programs and the end of destabilizing actions of air, land, and sea. Above all, it must reflect and support the democratic aspirations of the brave people of Iran." There's the European Union, basically endorsing regime change. President Trump says this ongoing campaign could take up to 4 weeks. He addressed the nation again on Sunday afternoon before returning to the White House.
Over the past 36 hours, the United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury, one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building.
President Trump then goes on to detail some of the things that I've already talked about. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that this is something he's wanted to do for 40 years. What they have accomplished in taking out Iran's air defenses, went without saying. I haven't even talked about that. It took them less than 24 hours to take control of the skies over Iran. Netanyahu said on Sunday he's waited 40 years to do what they're about to do, and that it's only going to get more intense after this. Hezbollah, also an indication they understand the time is nigh, the time is short for their axis. They started launching rockets at Israel again. Israel rolled out its shiny new rocket intercepting launcher. It's not really a launcher, it's a laser. Video seen of the Hezbollah rocket launches show that this new laser technology is doing pretty well. So, that's kind of the beat-by-beat overview of the weekend. The two big things that stick out to me, we're not in Kansas anymore when it comes to the Middle East. We're not in Kansas anymore. We're learning that that entire region didn't tolerate Iran. They hated Iran. They hated Iran. But none of them either felt that they possessed the capability, the forward strike capability to do anything about Iran. So they had to sit around, triangulate, and seethe for 47 years. Now, Iran has miscalculated and has given, no pun intended, all of these Gulf Coast countries all the ammunition they need to fire away. After all, Iran is attacking them. We're going to learn how much of the Middle East, how much of the movers and shakers in the Middle East, how much they see themselves as Saudis, as Emiratis, or as Muslims or Islamists. We're going to see how much. And there's a big difference between a Saudi and an Islamist. I think a Saudi just wants to make money, engage in the fruits of slave labor to build those opulent buildings and cities. Much the same for the rest of the Gulf Coast countries. An Islamist looks a lot like Iran and their mullahs and what they've done for the last nearly 50 years. So that's the big picture to me. Also, there's this. What we've learned over the past year is that the militaries of Israel and the United States and their attached intelligence apparatuses, these militaries and these intel outlets possess frightening, cold capabilities this world has never seen. And these militaries are ready and willing to use them if needed, when needed. And this is a descriptive thing, not a prescriptive thing. I'm not justifying this at all. If you put a gun to my head and asked me to say, do you support what President Trump is doing? I would say yes, because he's got a track record. And I'm already seeing indications like he's made a couple of comments, ovations over the weekend that they've already thought 2-3 steps ahead here. Like they do have an actual day one plan for when the guns cool down. So gun to my head, ask me if I support what he's doing. Yeah, because he's got a good track record when it comes to military force, and he's made ovations that they actually have a plan. So these militaries, Israel, United States, just frightening. Just frightening. Also, these militaries are allies. Meanwhile, in Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping observes from afar. It's about 18% of China's oil imports come from Venezuela. That was January. And Iran. That's March. And between them, we took out the largest cartel boss. Mexico, wink, wink, Mexico took out the largest cartel boss in the Western Hemisphere, El Mencho. That was February. We're talking about China having to pay full price, market price for oil for about 20% of their oil. That doesn't sound like a lot. For a country the size of China, that's cataclysmic. So they've got this going for them, or against them. Also, I'm pretty sure Xi Jinping, or Xi Jinping, that should be his new name. I think he just purged a bunch of military leadership as well. Domestically, things are not good in China. Turns out you can just do things. I am directly smack dab in the middle of the generation, the millennial generation, that grew up watching nation building in the Middle East, watching thousands of U.S. service members die for what? Trillions of dollars spent in Iraq and Afghanistan, but especially Iraq for what? You'll excuse my generation if we have an allergic reaction to entanglements in that area of the world. And we're just a few days into this. 2 days to be exact. So nothing is final. But the coldness of what was being done here, the coordination, there's a plan. And if there's a plan, there's an end game. Now, I would like to hear what that end game actually is. I think President Trump, the Americans, could maybe do a little bit better job at that. But then again, they might not try, 4 weeks, don't put the cart ahead of the horse. But this is showing entire generations of Americans, mostly the millennial generation, that you can use this military of ours to do things. Whenever you use the military, it doesn't have to be an endless war and nation building, bringing democracy to populations that do not want democracy. It doesn't have to be the way it was done. There is a different way. Now, in this particular operation, who knows how that's going to work out? Time will tell. But it's been an extraordinary run these past 60 days. And this past year has shown us that the Israeli and American military and intelligence, they can do just about whatever they want. I thought I was going to go for 10 or 15 minutes. How about a half an hour? That's going to do it for a Monday. Regular order, probably tomorrow. Hope you have a wonderful day. See you again then. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.